Welcome to Light of Wisdom TV channel. Today we have a very special program, Sri Lankan Canadian Shining Stars, where we hope to shine a spotlight on very special, exceptional, talented youth, professionals and students in the Sri Lankan Canadian community. So today we actually have a very special guest with us, Savi Costa, who is a medical student, and in fact he got into not only just one medical school, he got into two medical schools. So pretty special. That's really great to hear, and congratulations, Savi. Ayubowan.
Ayubowan.
So why don't we start off with a bit of an introduction? So tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Savi Costa. I'm a first-year medical student at the university, or at Memorial University in Newfoundland. And yeah, I'm very thrilled to kind of be invited on here and to discuss my journey here today.
That's great. Really happy to have you here. Now, Savi, you come from a family of prominent medical professionals, so I'm sure you've had some early influences on this decision to go into the medical profession. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us about your early years and some of the early influences that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my mom is a family physician, and some of my earliest memories was staying overnight at the hospital when my mom was on call and kind of experiencing the hustle and bustle of the medical career. And I think that played a crucial role in some of my decisions as far as pursuing medicine. I also want to just acknowledge that both my mom as well as many of my mentors in my life have kind of demonstrated that a doctor is more than just someone who's treating patients. They're also a huge inspiration within the community to take really just actions. And one thing that was really interesting to me, like the first time I kind of discovered that, was when I was working on this COVID-19 ventilator fundraising project. And we organized this GoFundMe project because in Sri Lanka at the time, it was undergoing one of its worst COVID-19 surges. So there was about 300 deaths per day due to sort of unavoidable deaths because of the absence and shortage of ventilators. So what we decided to do is we decided to work with doctors on the ground in Sri Lanka, as well as in Canada, the US, the UK, as well as Australia. And all of these physicians, they played a role within their communities to spread word of this message. And we were able to mobilize over $35,000 towards the purchase of 6 medical ventilators and 30 oxygen regulators for these low resource settings in Sri Lanka. And I think that really drove home to me how influential a physician could be in inspiring these really just actions within their communities and getting the community motivated to take the actions needed to kind of solve these crises.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, and I would love to hear more about these special projects that you mentioned, because when you think of doctors, let's say, we would think the immediate image that comes to our head is the hospital, the doctor there in the white coat and so on. But as you mentioned, it's just simply not that only, right? And I love that the fact that you mentioned the impact that you've been able to be part of with your mom and the other professionals that you worked with before. So tell us a little bit more about those special projects that you've been part of, and what's something that's really close to your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned the COVID-19 ventilator fundraiser project. That was one GoFundMe that we did. We also did another GoFundMe for ICU medications and medical supplies, because there was also a shortage in Sri Lanka in 2022. And that was also an extremely successful fundraiser. We worked with volunteers on the ground in Sri Lanka as well, and we raised over $22,000 for the purchase of certain medical devices, for example, endotracheal tubes for neonates, as well as cancer medications, insulin, and various other blood gas analyses and other supplies, a range of supplies, a little more complex than our ventilator project. But yeah, that was another project that was very important to us. We also worked on a malnutrition project where, due to the economic instability in Sri Lanka, a lot of families were struggling. And what we did was we worked with the Ministry of Health as well as a community health professor in Sri Lanka to identify certain Ministry of Health areas that were in deep need of support. And we helped to sponsor over 1,000 families in, I think, 6 or 7 different communities to provide 1 month worth of provisions for food rations.
That's honestly really amazing to hear, and really grateful as well that we have young people like you in our community who's trying to make a difference. Let's switch gears a little bit, Savi, and about your journey so far in trying to get into medical school, the journey, because in Canada, for example, it's not really easy, right? There's a very sort of difficult process in the bachelor's degree you have to complete, and those other undergraduate courses that you have to do before you can even sit for medical school exam, right? So let's talk about your journey in that sense. How was it? Any difficulties you faced, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely faced my own fair share of struggles. It wasn't simply about just getting good grades and everything, but we also had to manage providing leadership experiences, various extracurriculars being engaged with and involved in, as well as volunteer efforts within hospitals. So my sort of time scale was that I spent 4 years doing a bachelor's degree, and then afterwards I did a 2-year master's. And so that master's was really helpful in gaining research experience because physicians, they practice evidence-based medicine. And so it's really important to recognize where the evidence comes from, which is research. And so I wanted to get my feet wet there. And then obviously after after doing my master's, I applied for medical school. And unfortunately, I didn't get in the first time I applied. I interviewed but was waitlisted, and I realized that I didn't want to just spend years of my life potentially getting waitlisted and not getting in. So I decided to kind of try my hand at Australia to get into medical school there. And thankfully I got accepted to the University of Queensland, and I started the program there. But at the same time, I also had applied to Canadian schools the second time around. So while I was in Australia doing my medical program, I was also interviewing for Canadian schools, and thankfully I received word in May and June that I got into Canada. So yeah, that's where we are today.
Being a Canadian, I would say I am very happy that you decided to come back home to us, and we have not lost such a talent to Australia, let's say. Savi, I would say I was glad in a sense to hear that, this journey was not so simple for you. There were some difficulties that you had to face, some obstacles you had to overcome. It was not simply sitting the exam and getting into medical school. So that must have been really stressful. I'm sure there were a lot of difficulties that you had to face managing with all those stressors in life at the time. So tell us about some of your, coping strategies, let's say. How do you manage stress? How do you deal with when you are faced with obstacles and you want to persevere through them? So tell us about some of things that you've done in the past.
I was very fortunate to be born into a Sri Lankan Buddhist family. So from a young age, I already was aware of how meditation could be very helpful in managing stress and emotions. And so that's something that I definitely implemented throughout my journey. Just kind of taking a moment to recognize how I'm feeling and how these emotions and these sensations are all temporary and they'll pass. And so that was definitely very helpful in sort of maintaining balance. I also really appreciate that I had a strong support network. I had my friends, I had my family, as well as my mentors to kind of bounce ideas off of and get advice from. And I also really enjoyed playing sports. I like to play rugby, and I also like to go snowboarding with friends. So those sort of things really help to maintain balance, especially when things are getting hectic.
Savi, I wish we can speak for a very long time. I think you're a very, very special, talented young individual, but we don't have as much time. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask you about, any advice that you have for the students and the youth of our country, especially the Sri Lankan Canadian community, because we're not just simply Canadians. We're a little bit more special than that, and I think there are I'm sure some struggles that we go through maybe might not be so much for other Canadians. So just share some advice, tips, or tricks for the youth today.
I think it's really important to be able to recognize how much opportunity that we've been given and how much we should be willing to give back to our community. So something that I always like to reflect on is that my parents, they came to Canada, they left their whole support system, they left everything behind in Sri Lanka to give us the opportunity to prosper in Canada. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize that opportunity and also take full advantage of that, and also be able to, once we advance in our careers, be able to kind of give back to the community as well as Sri Lanka, since they did so much for our parents as well. So I think that that's a really important thing to recognize and remember. I also would advise, just as far as tips and advice, it's very difficult. We'll always be encountering obstacles and difficulties in our lives. And I think that what's most important, I know it sounds cliche, is to just keep going, keep persevering, and remember why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that you'll be really impressed and really happy and satisfied with the results at the end.
That's great. And Savi, thank you so much for joining with us today, Sri Lankan Canadian Shining Stars program. We wish you all the best for your future and can't wait to come and see you as a doctor later on. So Aiboan, thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you.
And the audience today, thank you so much for joining our Light of Wisdom channels, Sri Lankan and Canadian Shining Stars. Look forward to some more new shining stars to be shared with you soon. Aiboan.